right. What do we got here? It looks like
We've
we got lots
people
of
just
people.
coming in. They're coming in
Hello,
fast.
everyone.
Yes.
Oh, I see Kim Branch. Hi, Kim Branch.
Oh, I know who
Kim
I
Branch
see.
has these little, she has like these little strawberry basket things that she makes. I've been eyeing those for my potato drawer.
Because
we had rogue
everybody has a
potatoes.
potato drawer, right?
Rogue potatoes. We found them. They
Nothing
decided
like
it
a
was time to
potato
start
drawer.
growing. All right, Amy, are we good?
Can we just give it like another, like, I don't know, 30 seconds or so? Because
Sure.
there's still a lot of people coming in.
I know. Coming.
116 episodes, and we still have
Oh,
3
wow, I
people
see.
that are
Cara Marie Piazza here.
Yeah. CMP is here.
Wow. How many people are signed up for this?
300.
Oh, no pressure, Julia. No pressure.
I already sent a message to her.
Yeah, it's okay. I won't see anyone's face. It's always so funny.
That's right.
In the comfort of your own home, talking
I
to
know.
people, but you don't see.
You're just like, no one's here. I'm okay.
Yeah, I watched a presentation last night at 7 o'clock. By 8, I'm almost in bed. I mean, I get up at like 4:30 in the morning, 5:30. I fell asleep. Thank God my camera wasn't on. Has anybody fallen asleep during a relaxing, beautiful, artistic talk on Zoom? I know one person here has. And she
No one's gonna
be my
admit
mother.
Oh,
She ain't gonna admit it.
I'm always the designated driver because I can never fall asleep sitting up. Like there's just no way. I need the perfect sleeping conditions. And then it's like, okay, I'm gonna sleep. But otherwise, no, I could never fall asleep to a Zoom or driving or sitting at my table.
Oh my God.
Blessing.
This is a good to know.
Good to know. Yes.
Yeah. Julia.
I won't be the driver.
Next road trip. Yeah.
Road
Like,
trip.
I never
Julia's
have
driving.
That's correct.
Like
All
people love to put on a movie and fall asleep.
That's a 30-second little thing. Here we go.
Okay.
Amy, count us in.
Always make me laugh when you say that. Hold on.
1, 2, 3, 4. Oh.
Do this right so we don't have to go backtracking.
Well, it's the end of the week. Now where you been? Well, now it's Feedback Friday, so come on in. Come sit down and stare at your screen. We got a presenter that you never seen. We're Feedback Friday, we're on the loose. We'll be the train, you be the caboose. It's Feedback Friday with Kathy and Amy. Mashed potatoes and the gravy. It's Feedback Friday all day long. Feedback, feedback, Feedback Friday.
Well, good morning, everyone. It is Feedback Friday, episode 115. That's amazing. Welcome. I'm Kathy Hattori, president of Botanical Colors, and joining me is Amy Dufault on Cape Cod, where it kind of looks like it might be sort of sunny. We've got some sun today, but of course it's also 26 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a really weird temperature for Seattle. Really cold for us. So I'm really cold, but happy to be here. Feedback Friday is our show where we speak with dyers, scientists, historians, artists, activists, oh boy, scholars, anyone who is interested about our favorite topic, which is natural dyeing and color. So just a few reminders. We still have a bunch of seeds available. If you get inspired by this incredible talk that we're going to be listening to and watching in a few minutes, don't forget to get your dye seeds. We've just got our indigo seeds in from Blue Light Junction, and we've got lots and lots of interesting things that you could grow in your dye garden this year. So don't miss out on those. Cara Marie Piazza is doing an ice dyeing workshop that's on Saturday, March 11th. And there's still time if you want one of her ice dyeing kits to purchase the kit and the class, or the class only if you've got your own stash, or just the kit if you want to experiment and be with us either via Zoom or in spirit. So those are available. We put logwood on sale because it's such a beautiful purple, and this was Mardi Gras week, and so we thought we'd celebrate that purple shade. So check that out. And Julia uses Beam paints, which is like our favorite paint purveyor. And so she'll talk a little bit about that. We have a couple new Beam products. One is a palette that is actually embedded in a wood slab, which is an offcut from the sawmill that they have on the island. And then we also have these travel paint brushes that are really cool. They unscrew and fit into the handle so that you could take your paintbrush with you, and it looks just like a little ballpoint pen kind of shape. They're really handy for those of you who like to wander and paint at the same time. And we also have openings in the Abu Bakr Fofana Santa Fe experience. There's 2 workshops that we're really excited about. The first one is a 4-day indigo workshop with including stitching. And then the second one is a mineral mud workshop, which includes a forage with a local, very well-known pigment expert. So it's going to be a very interesting kind of joining of 2 very fantastic people on this particular journey into the mud world. So don't miss out on that if you can possibly do it. And let me get into the intro now. Today we welcome botanical artist Julia Whitney Barnes. Amy and I met Julia's work when we were staying at like the Hilton Garden Inn at the Albany airport in New York on our way to Rhinebeck. And Amy asked me, do you want to go see the Shaker Village? I'm like, yeah, okay. And so we didn't realize we could walk there, but we figured it out. We walked there and there's this cute little structure that had this really amazing graphic on it. And so we went there and it was like this work. It was so beautiful. We saw her work across the orchard and we just like kind of were drawn to it. So we're very happy that we did all of these things to discover Julia Whitney Barnes. So her exhibit is called Planting Utopia, and she photographed and collected specimens from over 150 plants in the herb garden at the Shaker Village Heritage Society in Albany. And it's the site of the first Shaker settlement in the US. So Julia often works with the cyanotype process, which is an early cameraless photographic process invented in 1842. And it's about the same time period the Shaker gift drawings were being created. And through the use of this medium, Julia manipulates pressed plants from the herb garden along with intricately cut photographic negatives. And so for her works on paper, the unique blue and white prints are just the beginning, because then she uses those amazing Beam paints, gouache and ink. So she uses watercolor, gouache and ink to create layers and depth into these. And they're really, really beautiful. So can't wait to hear it. Just a quick housekeeping. Amy is our moderator. She'll be monitoring the chat and feeding all the questions to Julia as they come up, so get ready. Also, we'll have you all muted until it's time to complete the presentation, and then we'll open it up for hellos and goodbye. So without any this call's being recorded, and it'll be available for you to view after the presentation. So without any further ado, I'd love to introduce you to Julia Whitney Barnes. Julia, welcome.
Thank you so much, Kathy. About what time should I wrap up my talk?
Oh, you've got about 30, 35 minutes.
Okay, great. Let me start sharing. All right, so just a little bit about the project. It's been going on for about 2 or 3 years now, and it was Kathy Greenwood who is the director of public art at the Albany airport, invited me to come and said, I think you would really love working at the Shaker site too. It's right across from the airport. We are trying to do more cross-pollination between things at the airport and the Shaker site. And I kind of just immediately fell in love with the site, knew I wanted to do something, but had no idea what I wanted to do. So I saw that little building. It is called the Brick Drying Building. It was built in 1856. And at one point it was used to dry herbs that were grown on site. It was also like a chicken coop. It was like all sorts of things over, the last 150 plus years. And it wasn't being utilized for very much right now. So I always love to take sites where I see the potential of a way to activate them. And anyone who knows about Shakers generally knows their furniture and knows like a lot of the built-in furniture. So I wanted to make something on that site that felt like it was really built into that space. You can see the little chicken coops. They have also a view of the site. There's a little stream that runs behind it. And I did something on the north, south, east, and west sides of the building because I really wanted to have people be able to see something from every approach that they were there. And it's a bit more about me. So it is at both of these sites. They're both in Albany. The Shaker Heritage Society in Albany is much less well known than a lot of the other Shaker sites. So a lot of people would say to me, oh, I want to come see your work, but it's so far away from the airport. How do I get to both of them? And I realized that they thought I was doing something at the Hancock site, which is a site that people know a lot more. The Hancock site is amazing. But this one was in fact the very first Shaker site. So we are trying to give this site love and be able to, just welcome a lot more visitors. I did get a grant from NISCA, which was huge, to be able to fund the making of it. And then also funding from the Albany Airport Arts and Culture. So a little bit more about the project. I always respond to whatever site I'm working in, and I don't go in with a set idea. I really try to say, what could I do that would be meaningful for that site in particular? And you can see me here in the garden itself. And here's my drawing of everything growing in the garden. And all of those things are on my website too. I know I'm going quickly with this. One of the difficult parts of the project was timing the collecting of all of the species so that they would actually be something every time I drove up. I live in Poughkeepsie, New York, which is about an hour and a half from Albany. So I went with my flower presses and camera. Some species you just cannot press. So I found a way to incorporate all 150 in some way. There's my studio, and worked on this project, doing lots of drawings, doing lots of historic research, and figuring out how I could really activate this site, how I could honor the Shaker gift drawings that I was so enamored with, and what I could do that could also be reversed. So for instance, what looks like a mural on the outside of that building, they were actually created with vinyl, so it can be removed, and they are based on my cyanotypes, but then I used that vinyl process to be able to, leave no trace essentially later on and take something away. So I did something also on both sides of the Shaker building. So when you go inside, you're presented with one. There's the view with the doors open and closed. And then these are some more of the details of the works that are in the southern entrance to the airport. The works that are at the airport themselves in the entryway are prints that were on dye bond, and those are good for a public space because many people can come through and not worry about the original works themselves. And those pieces will be at the airport for quite a few years. And then there's also an exhibition inside of Concourse A So the Concourse A exhibition is only for ticketed passengers, whereas the southern entry, anyone can go and see. And the Albany Airport also has rotating exhibitions in the gallery space, and is a really amazing space to view art. There's not very many venues that are that sunny, and when you look out the windows, you're just watching airplanes take off. So you get to see art, and then you get to see all of these planes take off. And the Shakers, where the airport was built, was all part of Shaker farmland. And then in the 1920s, the Shakers sold it to the county. And then when the airport was built, it was actually the first municipal airport, I think, anywhere. And Shakers often were invested in finding like new technologies and using like hydropower and all kinds of things. So it was actually fascinating that the Shakers were reportedly interested in the flights and were actually getting on the planes and flying as well, even early on. So I want to take you back now to some of the historic inspiration for this project. Certainly Anna Atkins is a huge influence. She was the first person to, first artist to create cyanotype. Sir John Herschel was actually the inventor of cyanotype in 1842. And then the very next year, she started working in cyanotype. And Herschel saw it basically as a photocopy. So he was using it, as you might think about, as like a blueprint. So a way to make a copy of something. Whereas Atkins was a botanist and an artist, and she thought, wow, I can do so much with this medium. And this was the very first book with photographs that went with it. And it was started in 1843. Also, William Henry Fox Talbot. So he was creating these like salted paper prints just a few years before then. So there was a lot of this like very early photography going on, contact prints. And then also a big influence was herbariums. So here are 2 pages from Emily Dickinson's herbarium. And people created herbariums for all different purposes. And there you can actually see online Emily Dickinson's entire herbarium. One of the things I really loved about this one is that as far as I could tell, the way that she organized the pages was just how she wanted to put the flowers together. I didn't necessarily see any kind of like science per se behind it. It seemed more of like an artist. Of course, we know her as poet, creating this herbarium. And when I create my compositions, I'm thinking about the plants and kind of having a conversation with the plants, but really approaching it as an artist versus like a scientist in that way. Another big influence were the fracture drawings and paintings that were considered like Pennsylvania Dutch. Dutch is really a misnomer. They're actually like Deutsch or Germanic. My mother's whole side of the family is from that part of Pennsylvania. And I grew up just seeing like calligraphy drawings, kind of similar to this one here that my grandmother would make. And I also saw imagery that relatives like earlier on had made as well. And you can see, so this was like somewhere like late 1700s. And I tried to think about what the Shakers were influenced by when they were doing their gift drawings, because in some ways they look like nothing else. And in other ways, I could see the influences. Here are also some seed packet labels. The Shakers were selling seeds. So they were coming up with packaging, they were selling seeds. They were selling the plants to like medical doctors that were working with people all over America. So they weren't just making these for the Shaker community. This was like a big moneymaker, an important part of their economy. This is a drawing of what the Shaker site looked like. So this is the Watervliet site. That is the name of the site in Albany where my installation is. This is an interior at the Shaker, Hancock Shaker Village. And one of the things is really the bright color. So when people see a lot of Shaker furniture, they see bare wood, no color. They think minimalism in this way, but actually the Shakers used a lot of color, including very vibrant color. So that was something that I wanted to really tap into and think about the color palette. Here are some of the gift drawings, and in some cases the dates are unknown. Other dates I kept coming back to was like 1843, 1844, and realizing this amazing connection that Anna Atkins was making the very first cyanotypes, botanically inspired cyanotypes in 1843, at this exact same moment that the mostly women Shakers were making these gift drawings, and that very, very doubtful that they knew about each other, but they were both in different areas tapping into something that felt like a distillation of many different ideas. Here's another one. So this is by Polly Collins. And you'll see some of these compositional motifs later on in my work. And I wanted to think about, so what are the images of the plants that we see here? And then in my works, you'll see every plant that's in it is a plant that was actually growing in the Shaker garden. And here's another one. So the Tree of Life. This was also like a cutout piece. So they're all works on paper. And for the most part, I worked either on paper or in canvas forms. So very stylized, very ornate, involving also a lot of text. So a Tree of Love, a Tree of Life. This is by Polly Collins. This was one of the few gift drawings that we know of that was made by a male Shaker, so Joseph Wicker. This one I just kept coming back to as well, of like looking at these different like life cycles. And if you remember some of those forms with like the interlocking circles too, you'll see that later on. And this is another one. So this was anonymous. We always say like anonymous was a woman. So probably by a woman, we don't know who. And this was made in 1843, that exact time of Anna Atkins. Another one by Polly and Jane Reed. So thinking back to some of those like early fracture drawings, some of the other imagery, what are the plants, what are the animals, what are the symbolism in these? Another one of my absolute favorites, so also by Polly and Jane Reed. This was an interpretation of heaven, and specifically she was envisioning heaven to be directly above where the Shaker village was. And she said that the streets would all be lined in gold. There'd be water running all throughout this. So I really just like kept looking at each component of this drawing and thinking about how it would translate into like different plants, and tried this out all different ways. I did make a version of it too that was all blue and gold. In general, I was staying away from gold, although I use it a lot, just because I was like, oh, that's not very Shaker. And then when I read that, in fact, that here where they used yellow, the idea is that it would have been roads of gold. So some of my process, now you can see these are all my drawings. So specifically this one relating to, of course, this piece we just saw here. So I did all drawings by hand. These are all pencil on paper. And in many cases, I was drawing specific elements of one of those Shaker gift drawings. I was often taking many different parts of them and putting together how I envisioned those forms. And I made dozens of these drawings. This drawing that was based on that wreath piece, I made as like a 5-second scratch drawing, and then a little bit more elaborate, and then a little bit more elaborate, until I finally got to the point where I knew what I wanted to do with this one. And this one, of course, it was based on the anonymous artist. And as I was distilling these down to saying, where would the images be? Where is the mark making on the page? What did these symbols mean at the time that they were made? And what symbolisms do I want to imbue my work with? This symbol in the center, that people think looks like a chessboard or something. It does, but you can see it also has this extra row, so that way it's completely symmetrical. And the Shakers were definitely using a lot of symmetry within the work, and you'll see that in my composition. So none of them are exactly symmetrical, but they're playing around with symmetry. So here's me in the garden. There's a very large Shaker building behind me. When I was first trying to figure out what I wanted to do on this site, a building like that it's still at this point in like real need of refurbishment. But I was really trying to say, what can I do with something that feels like whatever I put inside of it can make a big difference? So that was how I decided on the brick drawing building, as opposed to like a huge building like this one that actually wouldn't be so safe to have a lot of visitors come inside. So I chose this little building here. And for people that know my work well, I've also been working on this piece called Hudson River of Bricks for over a decade now, and it's all created with historic Hudson River bricks. So my love of brick was in here. It was a little nod to that. I don't specifically talk about it in the piece, but a lot of people know me for that brickwork as well. And, you know, I did some drawing, so just all hand drawings and thinking about what I can do with this space. And I started off thinking, I'll do something on one side. No, I should do two sides. No, I should do three sides. No, if I'm gonna do three sides, I really need to do all four sides, and come back again to that idea of like symmetry. The Shakers believed that like God or the divine was both equal parts male and female. So you see a lot of parts that were like this divide. So it was a segregated community. So all men would live in one part, all women would live in another part. But it was actually America's first integrated community in terms of race. So anyone of any background whatsoever could decide to be a Shaker. It was pretty amazing that, thinking back to what else was going on in 1700s, and that the Shakers were founded by a woman. And at the time, if you were married, your husband would own you. So the idea of celibacy was also saying, well, no one will be married, therefore no one is going to own someone else in that way. And I think that, like, you know, my works, they reference a lot of parts of the Shaker beliefs, but definitely it's my own 2022/2023 take on my interpretation of their legacy. So lots of pressing of plants. In my work, I use a lot of flowers, and a lot of the plants that I used at the Shaker site were things I never would have worked with otherwise. I was like, a green leaf and another green leaf and another green plant, another green plant. So keeping all 150 separate, of figuring out what was a huge undertaking. I had these books that I was like putting them in and organizing them. And then I did actually create an herbarium. I think it was about 120 total that I was able to press, because about 30 species, either I never timed it quite right to be able to collect a sample of it, or they're just not something that you can press. They were like too bulbous of a form. So in this contemporary herbarium that I made, you can see that each one has the name of the plant, the common name, the Latin name, and then the historic uses. So like jaundice, syphilis, cathartic, or this one was like on the right for like gonorrhea, dropsy, diarrhea, dysentery, like all of these purposes. So like a lot of times you would like look at these beautiful plants, and then you'd be like, oh, this one is for warts, this one is for ringworm. So I really love the back and forth relationship between like this bucolic garden, and then thinking about all of the ways that these plants have been utilized by people, you know, for thousands and thousands of years. Some of them were cultivated, some of them were wild, some of them were native to the region, other plants were brought in. I'm sure that there was definitely tons of indigenous knowledge that contributed to the garden at the Shaker site. Like you can see the hops on the left. They're generally considered to be celibate, but I thought this was interesting that Shakers did actually brew and drink beer as an occasional treat. So I was like, okay, so all of the things that we might think of these like, you know, very pious religious people, they were known as Shakers because they were called like the shaking Quakers, because their dance was so vigorous that they would like shake the entire church. So there's a lot of things that I think could be open to interpretation, but to my mind, it looks like they worked very hard, but they also had a great time and a great life. Here's me in the studio working on some of these. And when we talked about, I do really love beam paint. And I just like love so many different kinds of pigment, and I created my different hybrid style over many years, just figuring out layers. I've also done lots of like decades of oil painting, printmaking. So seeing how I create something, how does it become layered over time? Where am I using opaque pigments, translucent pigments? The beam paints in particular have like a honey base to them. And I think that like they have like a very unique quality. So when you're looking at the final works, like you do see the different ways that the paint is expressed over the page. And another one. Yeah, layering in here. So these original pieces are 30 inches by 30 inches, and then they were photographed in sections so they could be printed really big. And then they're currently 4 feet by 4 feet at the airport. And here's another view of my desk. So you can kind of see some of the early like symmetry parts to them. I have 2 studios, one at home and one is in a commercial space. So this is my studio there where I was just like putting up like all different drawings, all different images of those shaker gift drawings. I love this photo so much. So this was one of the pieces that's at the Albany airport. And when you install a show at an airport, it has its own unique challenges of like, how do you get something from point A to point B? You actually just have to like take it through the airport. There was also an image of this piece going down the escalator, like took it down the escalator and like this like child like pointing and being like, what's that? And then I saw also that it was like, my piece was the exact colors of like the airport signage. And that was not at all intentional. This is one of the big pieces in the shaker barn. So I worked in this space kind of as like a secondary studio to make a lot of things on site too. You can see that once it got into the little drying building, these pieces were a super tight fit in there. So that's why I didn't like spread them out. I had to spread out in the barn. And then when they were raised, they were like the exact size of the interior. Here is the installing of those vinyl murals. It was pretty interesting system where like they get warmed and then there's like a rubbery wand type thing to like get them into all of the grooves. We're hoping that they still look good, at least to like weather the entire winter. They should be able to last a few years and still look good. So we're kind of keeping them up on that exterior until they start to fall apart. So here is the Albany airport. And if you go in the south entrance, it's the very first thing that you'll see when you enter the airport. So I also love this idea of it being like the very first thing that visitors can see or the very last thing. And that, you know, maybe they've traveled anywhere around the world and then they see these as their final stop. So it's these 8 compositions. I showed some of them in process and you can see these all on my website too. And playing around with the symmetry, playing a lot with like what the real plants looked like, my interpretations of those gift drawings. So each one being different, each one relating to at least one gift drawing. You can see that one was like the wreath form. When I collected the plants, for the most part, I didn't take the roots too. Like I wanted to be able to leave the roots in there. And so like I would just paint the roots into the compositions. There's like my tree of life version. This was one of the more challenging paintings I made. And I realized it was just like, I used probably like 50 different kinds of green, of like mixing green after green after green. Like, how do I make something that is really referencing all of the greenery of this garden without it feeling monotonous? And I'm definitely like a color maximalist. So finding a way to keep being interested with the greens was, you know, a difficult part of it. And certain parts like, you know, like the strawberry plants on this one. So where do you have, when people first hear the term herb garden, but in fact that herb garden can contain so much. The garden is a recreated garden, so it hasn't been continuously exactly in that spot, but historic research has shown that these are the things that had grown on site. There's my version of the one with the map. So where I have all of the plants going around this composition, was in that original drawing where all of the rivers were running. So I was thinking about like the plants like being like the rivers that were going through it. I tried a lot of different compositions too with like those plants like within those little box forms, and they just never really felt right. And I like pairing in my work this combination of something very geometric with something very organic. And being able to like let those kind of stand on their own. If you were seeing these in person, you could see that like there is a lot of actual gold in these works too. So they really shimmer in that way, like that vision of heaven. This is the one that was based on the like kind of like that chessboard, but the symmetrical one. And then I laid in hummingbirds because I did actually see hummingbirds on site. They're one of my favorite birds, and I always think that they're just amazing. And you can see I paired like a male on one side and a female one on the other side. So a reference of that duality of the divine being male and female. And once again, like playing around with also like the different moons in here. This is some of the signage and then some of the installation within Concourse A. So there's also prints of the work in here. And then there is a whole section of historic prints too, because most people have never heard of a Shaker gift drawing. And I thought this was a unique opportunity for people to be able to see those works. And there's also some of the herbarium pages themselves, some of the Anna Atkins cyanotypes. So visitors to the airport are often just sitting there waiting for the next thing. So you do have an audience that can actually like do a little bit more research and read about what they're looking at. So we made all these prints. One of the parts of the project that has taken up so much time is just like getting in touch with different institutions, getting permission to like make prints, getting permission. I am embarrassed to say that I'm so far behind on a book that I was hoping would be out already, but books take a long time. So I really want to have the historic matter in there as well. So it's just been a slow process to get permissions, but I'm so excited about it. And I've had some wonderful collaborators on the project, write essays for it. So hopefully in the next few months, that will be able to be out in the world. So also you can see the works at the airport. That exhibition has been extended through, I think, June at this point. So you can go and see those works in person. You can see, so in the display cases, these are some of the pages from my herbarium, as well as the Emily Dickinson herbarium and the Anna Atkins cyanotypes. And then some of the original works of mine. These are works on canvas that are a combination of acrylic, watercolor, gouache, and cyanotype. And there is another beautiful shot. My husband, Sean Hemmerly, is a photographer, and I'm super lucky to have him go and photograph all of my work. So you can see where things are sited. So this is the herb garden on the bottom, the brick drying building, and then that big shaker barn on the left-hand side. And what you can't see is actually like a little stream that runs right behind the brick drying building. And there was originally a little bridge that ran across in that area. There's a detail, so you can see that the works like feel like they're painted on there because they're really smushed into all the crevices of the brick. And some of the other sides to it. So if visitors come and the building is not open, at least they can see all four sides. A lot of people just use the site as like an area to like walk their dog, go for a walk. Not having any idea about the Shaker history or really even where they are. This is a rare view on the left-hand side of that other side. That's kind of like the back side. And then if they're there when the site is open, they can walk through and see the two facing installations. One of my ideas for the installation is that it would change over time. So I am collecting different plants from the garden and actually hanging them within the site. So sometimes you'll see only dried herbs, other times you'll see fresh plants drying in that way. And each of them are tagged with all of the information that you'll also find in the garden itself. So I have this book here and some twine, and I made these little tags to be able to put on all the plants to help people learn about the plants as they come and visit. You can see the indigo on the right-hand side. So the garden was mainly medicinal plants, but also culinary and dye garden as well. So if you visit there, you'll see all of these various plants. Here is both sides. So when you go through the space, you can see the kind of the entrance and the exit. And I like to show it to like how it feels. So this is looking at the exact same piece, but with the doors open versus the doors closed. So there's like a real meditative feeling to being in this space. And I think that it changes, like you can feel very insular and all of the windows are like a frosted glass. But then when you open up those doors, you're really like opening and seeing through and seeing the rest of the Shaker site through that space. These were some visitors at the opening. And it's been really amazing just to like, hear all different people's views of it. And I've done workshops on the site. I will be doing at least one more workshop this summer and doing some more public events there as well. And one of the things that I've done as an artist is make prints of my work. And I really started to see that as a way I'm saying, how do I make public art? But then I make these super expensive, unique objects that only one person can ultimately own because it takes so long to make. It's kind of how it has to be. But by making limited edition prints of the work, I can really be able to share that with so many other people. And that's been a really amazing thing. I started a little less than 2 years ago offering prints of my work. I spent years making test prints to really get the exact thing that I wanted, to try all the exact kinds of paper. And it's actually scary how similar the prints look to the original work. Like I feel like I got too good at it. Now I'm like, that could be the original piece. Even for me, after I sell the work, I like to have the prints around to reference. And I do them in a variety of sizes, and it's fun to see like, some details will be a little bit lost in the tiny sizes. I've made prints as small as like 5 by 5 as these like little mini prints that I give out to people. And then the whole fact that like the Shaker gift drawings were literally created as gifts. And then all of those little mini prints I've been actually gifting to people too. So kind of keeping that alive. So when people buy prints, I tend to just like tuck in a little mini print. And you can see some of the different ones here. And one of the things I think is a little bit lost when you see them on my website is like understanding the physicality of the print. So on my Instagram, especially, I have like a lot of videos where I can show more close-ups. I can show process on all of that, just to be able to have people more familiar with them in that way. And that is the last slide on here. So hopefully I left a good amount of time for people to ask questions and go through things.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. This was really a beautiful presentation. Amy, I'm going to turn it over to you. Julia, you can go ahead and stop your share and we'll start the Q&A.
Yeah, lots of questions. Thanks, Julia.
Sure.
Okay, are you ready?
Yes.
Did you want to take a sip of water quickly?
Let's see.
Okay.
All right.
All right. I'll say it slow. Okay. What is saltpaper?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't work in that process, so I don't know exactly. From what I understand, it's some kind of contact print where something, which my guess is it's some sort of salt-based something, has been applied to the paper and then the physical object placed on top of it. But yeah, I don't work in like that style of print, so I'm sure there's like some early photography history buff who could explain it better than I am.
Mm-hmm. What
that
is?
One, I think ask the Google on that one.
Yeah, I know. I will. I've been writing down little notes too. Okay.
Yeah.
So talk about what a gift drawing is and why there's so many astrological images.
Yeah, I'm really curious about that too. So not much was written by the people who made them about exactly why they were doing a certain thing. I feel like, so a gift drawing they were generally considered to be sort of like secret drawings. They were called spirit drawings or gift drawings. And so much of the shaker life was like quite minimal. And this is the one instance where like you can see that those pieces are just jam-packed. Like they're very maximalist versus minimalist. And there's just encoded so much meaning. And even though some of these works I've stared at for like, dozens of hours, I still notice something new. I think that there was definitely an influence from the fracture drawings, but also an influence from like Masonic symbolism. And I certainly like an interest in astrology and celestial beings. One thing I didn't mention before was that blue was considered to be the most celestial color and was considered to be like the holiest of colors for the Shakers. And they would do a lot of blue in the interiors of their meeting houses. So that was another reason why I thought the cyanotype was a perfect pairing for specifically the Shaker site.
Okay, let's see. Somebody's asking, your cyanotypes for this project are beautiful. Do you ever use gum bichromate as another way of using a base color photographic process for your painting work on top? And how was that process underneath your painting and pigments?
So the short answer is no. I've never used the gum process, but I have seen photos of it. I've done a lot of things where I've toned the cyanotypes as well. So I've toned them, and you can see images of that on my Instagram. So they can be kind of like a creamy yellow color, even like a greenish color. You can T-tone them so they can be brown. And I've also done solar fast, which is another more modern product that comes in a variety of colors. So I've done a lot too with the pink color.
Okay. Okay, do you ever plan to host workshops or classes? I live in the area and have been experimenting with cyanotypes a little bit for fun, but would love to learn more about your process if you're open to sharing.
Yeah, I get a lot of requests for workshops. Last summer I did 2. So I did just a 1-day workshop at the Shaker site and then a 5-day workshop in the Catskills. I am running that 5-day workshop again in the Catskills. It's at the Sugar Maples Art Center. We had a wonderful time last summer. There's housing right on site. So people flew in actually from all over, from East Coast, West Coast, North, South, all over to join me for that workshop. So that was amazing. I think the registration started just a few weeks ago on that, and it does fill up fast. So as far as I know, there's still room. Last year, people also got on the wait list, and stuff happens. So there were some wait list openings. So that's definitely a possibility. That's the only like intensive cyanotype workshop I'm doing. And then I'm also going to be doing like a 1-day in New York City, a 1-day at the site of another installation I'm doing at an Octagon house, and one at the Shaker site. So there'll be at least 3. So make sure you're on my mailing list and Instagram and all that, and you can get a lot more info about that.
Julia, are they on your site too, the classes? I'll have everything in the
there's a link to the Catskills one from my website right now.
Okay.
The other ones were still kind of to be announced in terms of the details. So those are not on there yet. I honestly tend to put something out on Instagram before I remember to put it on my website. So that's probably the first place people can hear about it. And then I'm like, oh, I should post it on my website too. And then that happens.
All right. Okay. I gather you are not painting on cyanotype prints. Do you somehow transfer the print to a medium for painting?
I am painting on cyanotype prints. So yes. And like I said, it was a process that I developed over probably a decade. I used to make a lot of intaglio prints and paint on those. So it's like a background in all sorts of painting mediums, printmaking mediums, and a lot of trial and error to get to the point I am now. But yes, I do paint right onto them.
Okay. I feel like you've answered a bunch of these questions. I'm just kind of scrolling through here, but here's a good one. Do you have a favorite flower press you can share?
So I hope this isn't like sacrilege to say, but Probably my favorite one is the microwave one.
No.
And the reason for that is that it keeps the colors so amazing. And there's sometimes I'm really patient and other times I'm just not patient at all. So it's amazing that I can like pick something and actually have it pressed the day that I picked it. And all like, it's like layers of felt and cotton. And so I microwave it and I can like push something down, do it for 30 seconds, and then I can reshape the flower, do it for another 30 seconds, check on it, see exactly. So like there's a lot of the shaping of the flower that I do as it's being pressed. So it's not just like squashing something in there and forgetting about it. I also have 3 wooden presses that I use a ton. I think anything that has like a nice heavy duty wood, and then I like a really long bolt because then you can really put in a ton of stuff into those flower presses. So long bolts, heavy duty wood. And then you have to check on them a lot. Like you have to like, as you're pressing something, you don't just stick it in there and forget about it. If so, they'll like mold or whatever else. So you really need to like go back through and check on them a lot and like change out paper and everything else.
That sounds like a whole rabbit hole right there. Of
It's
pressing
so much
flowers just to not get the mold on it and stuff. Because that's what I would have thought. You just pressed it and walked away, but
no.
okay.
I mean, that will work with certain plants, but a lot of
Yeah.
plants won't work on. So yeah, and if you have some really wet plants in your press, and those are going to like moisten up everything in there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, here's one. What was your relationship with plants before this project and how has it changed during? What is next? This is also fascinating and inspiring to see. Thank you so much.
I would say my relationship with plants is that I've always been interested in plants, and loved plants, but wasn't the best at like, walking into a garden and being like, knowing exactly the names of which one, like there's feverfew next to, a goldenrod next to whatever. And it's hard as an adult to recognize when you have a developmental leap and say, oh, I have learned a lot. Like I have 2 young children, so I see the developmental leaps in them. And I still have such a meager understanding, but I know so much more now about plants than I did 2 years ago. And so I feel like kind of like that work that you don't see in the physical things that are in it is deep. And just this, like, I have a 13-page document that I've like written notes on all over about all of these different plants. And I think one of the confusing things is like a common name. Oh, but then there's that also common name. So remembering, oh, that plant is also that plant, but it has 2 different names and like all of those things together. So it's been fascinating to learn more about it. And yeah, I mean, I think that plants are just unbelievable. Plants can just do so many things. Our human relationship with plants, and then like the animal kingdom's relationship with plants, and then this whole like relationship to beauty and like relationship to like native plants, invasive plants, like how do you introduce and like what plants are beneficial, what are they beneficial for, dangerous plants, like precious plants, wild, cultivated. It's just, yeah, I could go on and on. I think that everyone has their own unique relationship with plants and it shifts over time. So
so interesting. I know we've talked about it a bunch of times on these feedback Fridays, to like different apps that one can use to just take pictures of the plants when you're out in the wild, but to see all the different medicinal and dye properties of the plants is just so interesting to have as you're hiking or taking small walks.
And even now, like on an iPhone, if you swipe up, it'll say like plant and it can tell you information about it. I've tried using that and I've like downloaded so many apps. They can recognize some of them, but like ones that I'm positive what it is, I took notes on it when I pressed it, I'll test it. I'll like say like once I've pressed it, I'll try to take a photo and see if it gets it right. Like 75% of the time it does not get it right.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's good, it's helpful. And I do think that like, you want to have something like studying plants be accessible. And I do think that like having that feature makes something like that more accessible. And it gives people, a jumping off point, but like, it's not going to be the most precise, but it's certainly better than nothing.
Mm-hmm. Julia, so two people have asked, are the long blue and white prints that are inside the drying house, are they actual cyanotypes or
They
reproduction based
are.
stuff?
Those are actual cyanotypes, and
Whoa.
those were beasts to make. They
Whoa.
were they're on like a cotton fabric, and then I worked into those with all different pigments too. And yeah, no, I mean, they were a huge investment of resources and time. And really, I got them together like 2 weeks before the show opened because it was so challenging. And I just had this idea, and I could have done them in like a whole bunch of like strips and done it so much easier. But in my head, it just had to be one continuous piece. So I did a lot of trial and error in systems, and I did get them to be all one piece.
Wow. I mean, because of the way that they're situated, because I remember Kathy and I went when we were in there, they're situated so they're not really having the light hit them, so they'll probably be preserved a lot longer.
Yeah, I worry more about like pigeons or mice or eating through them, things like that. Cyanotype is considered to be a pretty archival medium, and if they fade over time, you can put them into a dark space and they're supposedly return to almost their original deep blue just from being out of sunlight. So it's not that it's like a dye that's fading, it's like a more of like a response to the actual chemistry of the cyanotype within whatever substrate it's on.
Wow.
So we'll see, decades from now, I'm sure I'll try it. I do put my own work up all over, and I try to put them in really sunny areas too, to see what's going to happen. When I frame things for exhibition, I always use like a UV blocking museum glass. And like, even more so for the watercolor, because watercolor definitely fades over time. So I really want to keep like those rich colors vibrant for as long as possible.
Okay. Well, I think everybody wants to like buy all your prints. I put links in once or twice, but I'm sure your website is getting a large amount of people flooding in, and those prints are really hard to choose from because I've definitely sat for days in front of them like, which one?
And I should note too, there's a separate page for the Planting Utopia prints, and then there's also like my general body of work says like limited edition prints. So you'll see a lot of choices under the limited edition prints, and then a separate page for just the Planting Utopia prints. I wanted to give them their own section, since otherwise like they could get lost within the rest of it. And I love every time anyone buys prints, I write them a card. I love too that I'm like putting letters and like mailing something to people. And they can be mailed all over the world. The international shipping is of course more pricey. The shipping is free within the US. So anytime you see the price, that includes the US shipping. And I did that just so there was like no hidden costs in there, and make it really obvious for people.
All right. Well, there you have it. Very inspirational. Lots of nice messages for you about your presentation. You can read it later when we have the recording up, because it's all included in the chat.
Awesome.
But I'm gonna turn it over to Kathy.
And I'm just gonna say, hey everyone, it's time to unmute and chat and say hello and goodbye, and thank Julia for her beautiful creative work.
Thank you.
It really was beautiful seeing it in the airport. It was like such an eye turner, right? Like, oh, what's that? And then boom, to be at the
Thank you
village, boom, and just see that. It was really quite wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm always still surprised when people send me messages like, I was just at the airport. Like, I have no idea that many people flew out of the Albany airport. But
Yeah, yay.
Yeah. Yeah.
By the way, I see
Rhinebeck.
Kathy Greenwood on here. She's the director of public art at the airport.
Oh, thank you, Kathy.
Oh, there's
Greenwood,
Kathy.
for your
support.
vision. That is just, it's really a lovely exhibit.
We have loved having this project, and Julia has been a fantastic collaborator. And the exhibition here at the airport beyond the checkpoint, is accessible to travelers, but I would also be very happy to give personal tours to anybody who wants to make the trip between now and the end of June to see the exhibition. it's a fantastic program, and this exhibit in particular has just been a thrill to be able to present in concert with Shaker Heritage Society and Julia. It's been a great partnership.
Right.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay,
So reach
Amy,
out
we
to
got to go up there
Kathy.
again.
Reach out to Kathy, get a group together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go have a look.
Slow moving group.
Or my email, if anybody wants to reach out, is kgreenwood@albanyAirport.com, and Albany Airport Art and Culture Program.com is our website, and I'm reachable on there as well. So always love to facilitate a look at the wonderful public art we have here, especially Julia's exhibit.
Mhm.
Great. Okay.
Very generous.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that offer.
All right.
Okay, guys.
Should
Well,
we,
it's a
should we
little
do a
past
clap?
10.
We should be clap or something?
Yeah.
Let's all
that
just
was
clap
wonderful,
together.
Julia.
You can unmute yourselves. This is the
Yeah, this is applause.
this is for real applause, not shaking of hand applause.
Thank
For
you,
real
Julia.
students.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Really
Thank you.
wonderful.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you
you.
all. All
Thank you
right.
so much.
Take
Bye,
care,
Kathy.
everybody.
Yeah.
Bye, guys. Bye. Bye.